Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and today we're talking about all the books I gave up on, at least in the last 6 months. We're talking about all the books that I DNF'd or did not finish from the spring and the summer of 2024. I give up on books all the time. I'm a liberal DNFer. I'm a liberal quitter, and that's okay. I think if you're not enjoying a book, you should put it down for whatever reason at all. I'm just gonna go in chronological order and talk about how petty I am. The first book we're gonna talk about is Bluebird by C.L. Pirot. I was almost done with this book. I gave up at 70%, and I just found myself not caring. It's a sapphic gunslinger in space type adventure, and I was just like, the emotional weight of the story wasn't there for me. The stakes, although they felt high, I didn't feel the stakes, and the stakes didn't feel significant. It just was like, okay, very bleh. Then we have Nimona by N.D. Stevenson, and not because of anything about the content of this book. I was 35% in, but I got it digitally from the library, and there are certain graphic novels, when you get them from the library, the Libby app like frame around the book like makes the page really small. So even when I was reading it on my iPad, I had to like zoom into each panel individually to like read what was going on. So if the words in the speech bubbles were like 3 times or 4 times bigger, 4 points bigger, I probably would have finished this, because I was enjoying this little like middle grade fantasy superhero supervillain adventure. I couldn't physically read it. Like I had to Then we have The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. Now this is just a me thing. This isn't the book thing. This is I finished this book, or I DNF'd this book at 60%. And this is about colonization, and it's told from 2 perspectives that I don't enjoy. We have the colonizer princess, and we have someone who has been colonized and forced into servitude in the military by the colonizers. And so she's super ingrained in the colonizer mentality. She's been like essentially groomed to be on their side, and I just personally don't like those perspectives. If we had the colonizer and the oppressed, and we got each perspective, and like they were trying to like the oppressed were trying to like fight back, great. But having her so having the soldier so like she defends the colonizers, and obviously she's gonna grow as a character, and there's something to be said for that. I just wasn't liking being on the journey with her in that. And this is a romance, and I was like, I just can't get behind this princess soldier dynamic. The power dynamic was making me really uncomfortable, and I totally respect this book, and I think by the end I don't know if I personally would have been satisfied, but I feel like the character journeys would have been good for other people, just not perspectives I wanted to read from. Then we have The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I was 30% into this book, which was quite far, and I was incredibly bored. I thought this book was overwritten. The audiobook is 16 hours, and there were only 16 chapters, so it was a slog to get through. And yeah, I wasn't caring. I wasn't invested in this story at all. This is like a revenge tale. I just didn't care about his motivations, and I was bored, so I gave up. That's that. Then we have The Mirror Empire by Cameron Hurley. I have read a previous Cameron Hurley sci-fi, and this is her fantasy book. and I was 8% in, which isn't super far, but there was so much gratuitous violence in this first 8% that I was like sick to my stomach reading this book. And I typically can handle some violence, but I have to like be invested in the world and the characters, and there have to be other things going on. And this just like came right out of the gate with like these terrible, horrible, awful scenes of violence that were very, very detailed and described. And I was just like, nope, not for me. Then we have Deal with the Devil, which is a dystopian romance. And I was like 40% into this one, and I actually think this one is pretty good. I was like enjoying my time reading it. And I was actually even kind of into the romance, but it was one of those books where I would put it down and then I would never think about it. Like, I had no desire to pick it back up again. And so I was just like, you know what? If I'm not like incredibly invested, let's just move on to something else. Like, I enjoyed my time while reading, but if I can put it down that easily, like, how much am I gonna enjoy by the end? You know what I mean? So I just moved past it. Dragonwyck by Anya Seton, which is a classic gothic romance, and I was 40% into this and gave it up for so many reasons. The thing that I like about gothic fiction and classics that are gothic is the vibes. And the house is almost like a character in itself, and it's moody and it's atmospheric, and there's this sense of unease and dread, and the vibes are just immaculate. And this had no vibes. The vibes were completely absent. It's about this like farm girl, and she goes to this house with her cousin who's super wealthy, and the house is really cool, but like there was no atmosphere, no vibes, no sense of unease. Every once in a while the character would be like, oh, I'm randomly scared for no reason, and then we would move past it really quickly, but there was no like scene around that feeling to like convince me that she was actually like scared for whatever reason. So it just didn't work in that way. The fat phobia in this book is unbelievable. It was so disgusting the way that the character and the husband talked about the wife of this story. She was a bigger lady, and it was truly horrifying what they were saying about her and the way she was characterized, and I absolutely just like could not stand it. So I gave up. Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel was a big disappointment for me. I was actually 60% into this book. I really enjoyed Kaikei, if you can see it. Kaikei by this author was one of my favorite reads of the year that I read it. And I thought I was gonna get like the same execution, the same slow narrative, character development story, and this is about a goddess, and I don't like reading about gods and goddesses as main characters. I just don't. It's a very, very hard sell for me. And so this already had kind of an uphill battle in terms of my personal enjoyment, and 50% in, we get this shift. Even at the shift where we're following more characters, I still wasn't enjoying the new characters that much, so I gave up. So I'm really sad about it, but I think this book was never going to be for me, unfortunately, but I thought I'll give it a shot, and it just, there's something to be said about sticking with your comfort zone and or getting out of your comfort zone, and this is one of those experiments that just didn't quite land. I'm glad I attempted, but just didn't work out, unfortunately. Gosh, then we have The Copper Promise by Jen Williams. I am obsessed with the Winnowing Flame trilogy, and I will not stop shutting up about it. It's one of my favorite series of all time. It's so good, and The Copper Promise is a previous fantasy series by this author, and I really hated it. I read the first 25%, and it reads like episodes of a TV show. that are super disjointed. Like there's no driving, like very little connecting the pieces of the story. So it reads like a short story collection in novel form. And I didn't care enough about the characters that we had to follow them in their journey. We kind of have this woman and she's like a badass. It's almost stereotypical in its characterization, which I didn't really appreciate. I thought it was a little clumsy. Her characters are much more fleshed out and much more interesting and different in the Winnowing Flame trilogy than they are in this series. And it really sucks because I bought this entire trilogy. I don't typically do that, but I read the first couple of chapters of this and was enjoying the vibes. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna love this. So I bought the other 2 books and then I read more and hated it. So finish the first book first is the moral of the story. I don't do that a lot, but I thought for sure an author I loved before, I was enjoying the vibes in the very beginning, it should be a slam dunk. And unfortunately it wasn't. Note of the 9th by Tamsin Muir. 30% in. All I wrote was bored. I was on the fence whether or not I would finish this series out. I read the first 2 books and I loved Gideon so much. And I hated Harrow, the second book. But I was like curious enough about the plot to want to continue. And then we get to Nona and it's, again, very different from the previous 2 books. And I was just bored. That's it. Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. I was 50% in and I was also bored. This is a kind of an urban fantasy, kind of magical realism story, which is not my jam. It's usually something I steer clear of. I'm more of an epic high fantasy girly. And also, this was supposed to be kind of horror. And there was like one scene that I was like, yes, this is horrifying and really scary and really well executed. And so I kept reading, hoping for more of that. And then it went back to being boring. So it tricked me into thinking it was gonna be horror. Oh gosh, I feel a little bad about this one. Toward Eternity by Anton Her is a debut. I read 3 pages and I gave up. And I will say this for myself. When I'm physically reading something with my eyeballs, I'm much more critical of the writing and the characterization than I am when I'm listening to something. Something about the listening experience of reading is very different for me, and I can kind of like let the words and the story kind of wash over me, and a lot of the issues I have with writing are kind of smoothed out when I listen to a story. But when I'm reading it, I can hear my own voice in my head, and you know, sometimes I'm annoying. And the issues with the writing stand out even more vividly for me. And so I just hated the writing in this. The main character, it's from her perspective in the beginning, and she was super annoying. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it with this writing. I feel like other people won't mind, or if I had the audiobook, this might be a completely different story. But since I had the ebook, it was gonna be a no-go from me. Mars House by Natasha Pulley. I'm mad about this one. This is a sci-fi romance, question mark. And I got 30% in. The premise of the book is basically a right-wing politician is in an arranged marriage with an immigrant in a sci-fi setting. Okay, that's the premise. And so there's this power dynamic, power imbalance. There's this, you know, politic element that it was always going to be a hard sell for me, but I was like interested because I like arranged marriages as a trope, and I thought, well, maybe Natasha Pulley can handle the subject matter and the complex political nature of this story. And I read 30% and I was starting to feel uncomfortable and I couldn't necessarily articulate why. And then I read some reviews because I was like, are other people seeing what I'm seeing or feeling what I'm feeling? And the answer is yes, especially people of color. And so I read some 1-star reviews that kind of revealed some of the things that happen later in this book that are not only xenophobic and racist and also Zionist, and we're not about that in this house. So it looks like the author is not as nuanced when handling the xenophobia plot as I would have liked her to be. And the other thing that this author does is she completely eliminates women from the story. The people who live on Mars are all non-binary or androgynous, and our main character, the other main character, is a man. And so there are no women in this book at all. And apparently, and I'm just like, that's how you avoid the Bechdel test altogether. You know what I mean? So again, I would just recommend reading some of those 1-star reviews. I can't necessarily articulate everything in this video, but I was already feeling uncomfortable, and so those reviews just kind of confirmed what I was already suspecting, which is really disappointing because The Kingdoms by Natasha Pulley I thought was quite good, a good sci-fi romance. But yeah, I don't think I'll be supporting this author anymore or talking about The Kingdoms, to be honest. Last, we have Burn For Me by Ilona Andrews, and I think this one honestly isn't like terrible. This is an action adventure fantasy, urban fantasy romance. So first off, urban fantasy, not my favorite. Second, the balance between the action plot and the romance was way off. Halfway through the book, I was like, the two main characters were like attracted to each other, but like that was it in terms of romantic development. And 55% into a romance, I personally think there should be more than that, personally. And I didn't care enough about the action adventure plot line to stick with it. And I know there are other books in the series. This is the first book in a series, but I don't know. I don't know if these types of romances are for me. Maybe I'll try some more. And so let me know if you've read an Ilona Andrews that you think I might like, and leave it in the comments down below. Because like, I was enjoying it. I didn't think the writing was bad, so maybe a different dynamic would work better for me. Anyway, those were the books that I quit in the spring and the summer of 2024. Do you DNF books? Are you a quitter just like me? Let me know in the comments down below if you think there are any books on this list worth a second chance. I may or may not attempt one of these again. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye!